Hi. From Lewis's essay, Fern-seed and Elephants, I was encouraged to take my own experience as a former witness, scrutinizing my childhood religion, the thing that led me out of it, to do the same when it came to listening to and reading Christians. In this essay, Lewis is commenting on his problems with radical New Testament criticism. So I'll begin to read only portions from it, things that I found helpful. So just highlights from his essay. You'd have to get the book to read the whole essay to get all of his analysis. So I begin here. There are two sorts of outsiders: the educated and those who are educated in some way, but not in your way. So Lewis was educated in literary criticism. That was his field. I would say my education was having been acquainted with being in a cult and leaving a cult. So now here he says, a theology which denies the historicity of nearly everything in the Gospels, to which Christian life and affections and thought have been fastened for nearly 2 millennia, which either denies the miraculous altogether, or more strangely, after swallowing the camel of the resurrection, strains at such gnats as the feeding of the multitudes. If offered to an uneducated man, he will not recognize it as Christianity. If he holds to what he calls Christianity, he will leave a church in which it is no longer taught and look for one where it is. If he agrees with your version, he will no longer call himself a Christian and no longer come to church. In his crude, coarse way, he would respect you much more if you did the same. Now he also makes this point: I claim to be, or he confesses this, I claim to belong to the second group of outsiders, educated but not theologically educated. How one member of that group feels, I must now try to tell you. The undermining of the old orthodoxy has been mainly the work of divines engaged in New Testament criticism. The authority of experts is that discipline is the authority in deference to whom we are asked to give up a huge mass of beliefs shared in common by the early church, the Fathers, the Middle Ages, the Reformers, and even the 19th century. If he tells me, this critic, that something in the gospel is legend or romance, I want to know how many legends and romances he has read, how well his palate is trained in detecting them by the flavor. He says this because this is his field, legends and romances. And if you're going to say that the New Testament is just that, this is a good question. Okay, he further says, he gives you an example here. He says, turn to John, the book of John. Read the dialogues, that with the Samaritan woman at the well, or that which follows the healing of the man born blind. Look at its pictures. Jesus, doodling with his finger in the dust. I have been reading poems, romances, vision literature, legends, myths, all my life. I know what they are like. I know that not one of them is like this. Of this text, there are only two possible views. Either this is reportage, though it may no doubt contain errors, pretty close up to the facts, as nearly as close as Boswell, or else some unknown writer in the 2nd century, without known predecessors or successors, suddenly anticipated the whole technique of modern novelistic, realistic narrative. If it is untrue, it must be narrative of that kind. Okay, let's just see what else I noted in here. This is where he says, that is my first bleed. He actually gives you some more examples. These men ask me to believe they can read between the lines of the old text. The evidence is their obvious inability to read in any sense worth discussing the lines themselves. They claim to see fern-seed and can't see an elephant 10 yards away in broad daylight. So I just wanted to say his experience in literary studies is what enabled him to see something that we might not see as a problem, or at least not be able to express it. My experience was being involved in a cult and leaving it. So I believe my education helped me also to change my study habits and helped me to have critical discernment. So those of you who have left the Jehovah's Witnesses, I often hear people say they've wasted their time. They feel really badly that there was no good that came from it. But think of it as you were educated in a very specific way, in a specific area. I'm going to link to 2 videos. The first one is one of our Ray Franz videos where we were covering his book. This one is on Do Others Do Your Thinking? The second one is based on videos I did discussing Dr. Jerry Bergman's research on Jehovah's Witnesses. This one was called Jehovah's Witnesses Closed Society, Echo Chamber, and Opposition to Higher Education Isolates and Insulates from Criticism.